Welcome everyone to today's webinar, How WVU Medicine's AI Workforce is Reducing Administrative Burden and Increasing Staff Efficiency. On behalf of Becker's Healthcare, thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to walk through a few quick housekeeping instructions. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We will also have a series of poll questions during today's webinar. You can submit the answer that best applies to you directly on your screen in the slides box. Thank you in advance for your participation. Today's session is also being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. Lastly, if at any time you don't see your slides moving or have trouble with the audio, try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. We are here to help. With that, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Brad Gallagher from Olive.
Thank you very much, Ayla. Excited to spend some time with this large group from Becker's today, and thank you for Becker's for making this an option for us. My name is Brad Gallagher. I'm an executive director with Olive AI. I have the fortune of working with great folks like Elo and Leah to understand AI capabilities and design AI programs. And I think today is going to be a very rich session full of content and lots of opportunities for Q&A. So the planned agenda, and we'll intersperse some questions throughout this, is a little bit about WVU Medicine's background and their journey to adopting AI, how the paths converged across business and IT, and how there were great handshakes to optimize the program from both sides. And then we'll talk a lot about outcomes. I think that's a key area of interest for a lot of folks. What are the results of a program like this, and how can you use those results to build a program that's evergreen and adding value to your organization over time? So with that, we want to do a couple quick introductions before we get into the content. Elo, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, thank you, Brad. I'm Elo Romero, Vice President of IT and Assistant Chief Information Officer at WVU Medicine. I have the responsibility for our flagship hospital, Ruby Memorial. And my areas of focus include interoperability, analytics, software development, and the recent addition of artificial intelligence.
Excellent. And Leah?
I'm Leah Klinke. I'm Assistant Vice President of Hospital Revenue Cycle for WVU Medicine, and I'm responsible for the hospital billing functions, the hospital registration functions, utilization review, denials, authorizations, and customer service.
Excellent. So as we get started here, we're going to declare some variables around WVU's background and give the group some insight into the organization as a whole. And with that, Elo, do you mind sharing a bit?
Yeah, certainly. So WVU Medicine is a network of 14 member hospitals, largest employer in West Virginia, with over 20,000 employees, $2.5 billion in revenue, and really the premier academic health system provider of advanced specialty care. We're very proud of our signature programs. WVU Medicine's Children's has the largest group of primary care and specialty care, and surgeons dedicated to the care of children. And we are also the only children's cardiac surgery program in the state. The Critical Care Trauma Institute, we are the only level 1 trauma care center in the region. That designation is a designation that you have for treating the most severe injuries. Our Heart and Vascular Institute has an incredible reputation using some of the most advanced technologies surgery techniques. We have minimally invasive robotic surgery. We have video-driven thoracic surgery. We use some incredible techniques there, and we are also the only transplant multi-organ transplant center in the region, and that's particularly important because in our territory in West Virginia, kidney and heart disease are some of the leading causes of death. And we're glad that we can deliver this type of value. And then if you could move to the next slide, I like to talk also about the neuromodulation program and what some of the things that we are doing with our neurosurgery program. We are using some of the most advanced techniques. We just announced that we are first in the US to launch a program to use focused ultrasound technology to treat addiction for opioids. And we are few in the world that can do some very advanced procedures like deep brain stimulations, where they implant some electrodes as tiny as hair deep inside your brain, and to treat certain conditions. You see there is a photo of a man extending his hand. This is one of many patients we treated that was having tremor for 30 years. He couldn't even hold a glass of water, and is one of many patients that we were able to heal using some of these advanced technologies. So, and with that, talking about our journey to adopting artificial intelligence, I like to share a little bit of background story. You all know AI is pervasive of everything we do every day. We may not realize it has become so common with our life, from the suggestions that we get when we try to buy anything we are shopping online, or the suggestions for movies or for music. Think about every time you do something unusual with your credit card and you start getting all these fraud alerts. These are all things AI in action. And other areas, like even not obvious. I was like super scared when I learned that when we fly in these big airplanes, and that on average pilots actually manually control their airplane like for 7 minutes. The rest is done by AI. And so it's amazing. And even now we even have self-driving cars, which would have been out of a science fiction movie just a few years ago. And so it's amazing how much advancement there has been in many industries. I think in healthcare, it's just starting to catch up. And so as we started looking into this, I remember I got very passionate. I started taking online classes at night to learn about it, and even built my own TensorFlow server at home. I pitched some ideas to our senior leaders about some of the amazing opportunities that are out there. And next thing I know, we are on this path to build our internal resources, to build an AI team, and to start looking into opportunities to leverage artificial intelligence to improve hospital operations and create efficiencies. And so as we started into this journey, we wanted to have a very simple approach. First of all, we want to build those capabilities in-house because we think that will position us better for the future. But while we are doing that, we also want to partner with strong vendor partners that can help us capture value very quickly, and that can also provide a learning experience to the teams that we are trying to build. And our recipe really has been simple. Start small, prove value, and as you prove value, grow. And start with well-tested solutions that we know have been working well in other industries or even in healthcare. Let's just adopt those solutions and start using well-known recipes and start cooking with what is already out there. And a lot of focus also has been on value. If we can go to the next slide, there are many ways of measuring value. And I remember early on in this journey, our CEO, Albert Wright, told me, as you start this journey, I really would like you to stay focused on the initiatives that will have a big impact on a large population or on the bottom line. And because then with that, we will be able to reinvest those resources and put them back to continue to grow our programs and continue to deliver excellent patient care. And he was right, because when we look at AI, it's very easy to get distracted. There are so many opportunities out there, and you can get intrigued by many cool projects, but really it has been important to us to stay focused on where we could make the most impact. As we started working on projects, I remember the first two projects have been in population health, building some models to help predict patients that require follow-up after discharge. This was going to be a long journey. It was not something that was going to happen quickly. And I felt a lot of pressure to start showing value quickly. And so it was a really welcome opportunity when my colleague, Leah Klinker, came with her vision and her ideas about how we could use robotic process automation and AI in revenue cycle and leverage a vendor like Olive that will help us capture value very quickly. And with that, I would like to pass it to Leah to share about her part of the journey.
Thank you, Elo. Yeah, we were on our own journey in revenue cycle. WVU Medicine, as Elo said, is rapidly growing, acquiring facilities, and then also trying to kind of streamline technologies from an EMR perspective. And so I was brought into the organization in 2016 with the goal of systemizing our revenue cycle, especially our billing functions. And so when I came into my position in 2016, we were already partway into a journey to try to consolidate all of our facilities to the Epic EMR. And at that time that I came in, we had 7 hospitals in the health system. They were on 5 different EMRs and being run separately as 6 separate billing offices. The goal, we had three hospitals that were currently on Epic, and the project that was underway was a technology transformation to streamline all the facilities to our Epic instance in 2017. And so in 2017, we converted 4 additional facilities to Epic. We didn't change any of our operational structure. And part of that was because they had already started discovery for the build, and a lot of that was based on what was currently being done. And so we really thought we'll stick with what's currently being done and do the technology transformation to Epic. But what we found was, because everybody was operating separately and trying to operate in the same system, that we did see that there were varying results throughout the system from a billing results perspective. And we were looking to try to see how we could improve those results, but also had to keep in mind the fact that the system was continuing to grow. So every year, additional facilities were becoming full members of WVU Medicine, and on a journey to quickly flip those facilities to be on the Epic EMR quickly after their incorporation into the system. So we had to be very agile and be able to adapt quickly. And so in 2018, we did have another facility join, and that facility did convert to Epic. And we thought, I don't know if we can continue to operate the way we're operating now. We have 8 hospitals working in the same system. We're kind of all doing different things. We're operating as separate business offices, and we just didn't know if we could use that model to get the results that we kind of wanted to get. And so by the end of the year, we were achieving about bottom quartile results from an AR days perspective, and we thought we really need to change how we're operating. If this growth continues, the model that we have really is not scalable, and we won't be able to achieve the results that we really feel like we should be able to achieve. So in 2019, we decided that it was time to try to streamline our operations. And so in January, we created what we called a virtual centralized billing office. So of course, West Virginia being a rural state and us having business offices throughout the state, also WVU Medicine is the largest employer in the state, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to preserve the jobs and expertise of the staff that were working in the separate business offices, but we wanted to operate as one. So our centralized billing office model became a virtual one. So we basically not repurposed, but gave additional or different responsibilities to our current leadership team and our current staff. So we had somebody who maybe was a billing director at a particular facility, and now their function maybe was over all of the acute Blue Cross billing, for example. And so their responsibilities changed, became much more specialized, and then their whole team changed as well as we brought all of those Blue Cross billers under that particular leader's purview. And so it was a big change for them. I mean, obviously they were having to work in a different management model. Everybody's responsibilities changed. We had to change how people's workflows worked by redesigning work queues. And in the mix of all of that, we converted to additional facilities to Epic as those changes were happening. And of course, through all that change, we did see our results slip further in 2019. And at the end of the year, our results were really kind of in the bottom 10% of our peers. We were finding it very hard with the volume of accounts that we were billing and the size of our work queues. We were finding it really hard to prioritize the work for our staff. The work queues were overwhelming. We tried a few different models of trying to prioritize the follow-up work that they were doing, and really were struggling. And what we were finding is that when you have too much work to do, you tend to focus on the things that are a little bit easier to get through, that you can get over through a higher volume in a short period of time. And we were finding that the more difficult stuff was not being touched. And we also saw like our timely filing write-offs grow. And so we were at a point in 2019 where we were thinking we have to come up really with new solutions. And everybody's working very, very hard, but we didn't feel like we were working very smart. And we really didn't see a way out of the backlog that we had kind of created through our transformation. And of course, looking forward, knowing that we're going to have new facilities converting to Epic, we're going to have this change constant, we had to figure out kind of a different way of doing our work. And that's when we started looking towards artificial intelligence as an option. And after seeing Olive at a conference and seeing what they could do, I decided that maybe we should explore this as a way of kind of catching up on the work that we were unable to do at the time. So just to give everybody kind of an idea, we send about 3 million claims a year, and at any one time we have about 200,000 accounts that are outstanding, claims that are outstanding. And our costs were low, which of course is one of our goals, but nobody really cares if your costs are low when your results are bad, and that's kind of where we were.
Excellent. Thank you both very much for sharing 2 stories resulting in our rising action for the journey we're on today. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about how these 2 paths converged. But first, I know folks get excited by these. We're going to do a question. So if you can, please respond by clicking one of these circles. Which process at your organization do you think would see the largest impact from AI and automation? And I've been instructed to pause uncomfortably long here, so I will do that. We're at about 20%. 26 is exciting. 34. All right, our rate is petering off, so I'm gonna flip. Prior authorization, almost half. That's consistent with a lot of conversations that we've been having. Next up, almost a tie for eligibility and claim status, and then other, around 8%. This is really helpful. We'll try to weave this into some of the commentary for the rest of the presentation. For those that marked other, if you would like to explore that in the Q&A section at the end, please enter those notes in the chat to our team, and we'll try to come back if you have specific use cases you'd like to discuss. With that, now we're going to talk about the exciting stuff. 2 paths, an IT path, a business path, a tale as old as time in healthcare. We're going to now talk a little bit about how the paths converged. So question for Leah. How did the paths converge? How did you two meet, and how did you kind of launch the partnership here between business and IT?
So in 2019, I had brought the idea of artificial intelligence just through what I knew, that a partner like Olive could give us for claim statusing. I brought that to my boss and ultimately to the CFO Council as part of our 2020 budget. I was able to prove or show that I thought that this would have a significant impact on our results and ultimately produce significant value. They did approve that project as part of our 2020 budget. But of course, my boss, who's the CFO for the health system, had been involved in prior conversations with Elo and his team. And he knew that Elo's team was on a journey to bring artificial intelligence to the organization and building a team internally to build kind of that core competency. And so in order to take a more holistic approach to AI, he wanted me to work with Elo on this project so that Elo was kind of aware of all of the artificial intelligence type projects that were going on in the organization. So I contacted Elo, and the numbers, I think I remember the numbers that I proposed to him. I mean, Elo obviously is in IT, he's not super familiar with revenue cycle, but he was looking for high value projects where we can have a big impact, especially when it came to staff work and ultimately automating manual tasks. And so I told him that I estimated that we had 100 people in our organization that did insurance hospital, this is only on the hospital side, insurance follow-up. And that probably about half of their time was spent doing that. And that of that time, that probably 60 to 80% of what they were doing, I estimated was not value added. Because a lot of what they were doing was going out and checking status on accounts that really didn't require anybody to do anything to the account. It was just bringing back information that the claim was in process and on file, or the claim had been paid and we were waiting for a remit or something else. And that very few of the accounts that they were checking on did they really need to take some sort of action on. And so I felt like there was a lot of potential value in replacing that kind of not value added work and trying to focus and prioritize their work on accounts that they actually needed to take action on. So kind of elevating what they were doing beyond just click, 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 and actually trying to find what they really needed to do. And I think that really piqued his interest.
Yeah, so Elo, how there's kind of an interesting impasse here where on one hand you have high-powered AI, high-powered computing, TensorFlow server in the garage kind of things, and now you have a use case that is a little bit rudimentary in the form of claim status or eligibility checks in the revenue cycle. How did you begin to work across the two domains with your leadership to overcome concerns about what AI is? Maybe even how did you describe how you were going to apply AI in this revenue cycle use case? Because that can be a complicated topic for senior leadership.
You're right, Brad. And I remember at the very beginning when Leah approached me, I was interested, excited, but at the same time, I was not completely sold I needed to do my due diligence. And so I remember questioning whether, we will get the value that we were expecting from robotic process automation, and comparing that to the cost and time it would take to get there. And I was very nervous because, as you can imagine, we get inundated by vendors that reach out to us trying to sell us solutions and that promise that we can get to the moon in no time and do incredible things. And you have to sort through a lot of noise to really find true gems and true value. And so that was the initial concern, like with everything that comes our way. And so when Leah brought this up, the first thing we needed to do was really try to identify a way to do this so that we could prove the value first. So that philosophy of starting small, prove value, pilot it, and then once you pilot it and show that you can achieve value, then you can go bigger and deliver more. But the biggest challenge, like you mentioned, was also getting that alignment at the senior leadership level, convincing them that it was worth doing the investment. And it's not just an investment of what you have to pay Olive or any other vendor to start working on a project like this. It's also an investment on people. Because you are talking about people that have full-time jobs, that have a lot of work to do already, and that you need to pull out of what they do in their already busy schedule to start focusing on how they can implement a new technology, a new solution, and you have to sell them, because also you need to have their commitment. You need to sell them on the idea. And then, so get that alignment. So the alignment is not at the executive level. It's not just that. It's also alignment also with the people that are actually doing the work and getting ready to collaborate on a project that is going to completely change the way they do things. And so I think that was the biggest challenge, and so it required a lot of education. It required a lot of conversations, and really the idea to start small and prove the value at every level.
So that was really insightful, Elo. You mentioned doing some kind of market scan to understand the vendor landscape. How did you progress through that stage to separate the wheat from the chaff and arrive at Olive?
Yes. So when you got to the point to selecting Olive as our vendor partner, it required actually us to do a lot of due diligence. Imagine we cannot just go to our senior leaders and say, hey, we want to invest all this money and we have this one vendor that we already know is going to do it. You need to show that you do your homework, that you do your due diligence. And so in the most recent example, we compared Olive to vendors. We shortlisted to 5, and after shortlisting to 5, we created a gap analysis of what every vendor will bring to the table in terms of value, in terms of risks, in terms of their ability and experience to deliver in the areas that we were targeting. And you have to do your homework. You have to go through this due diligence. It's very time consuming. As you can imagine, you engage with each of these vendors, and then the ones that you shortlist, you have to go through 2, 3, sometimes 4 sessions before you are really able to gather all the information that you need to then complete your due diligence. And so I think that was part of what we had to do to to be able to go back to our senior leader and show that, yes, we did our due diligence, and yes, we are making this recommendation because these are the strengths that the vendor that we are recommending will bring to the table.
Excellent. Thank you, Elo. Leah, I know any type of technology can be important to manage from a change management standpoint within a function like RevCycle. And I'm curious for our Becker's crew, can you share a little bit about how you overcame blockers either on the change management side or the budgeting side or implementation side? What was the story there?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned in my kind of introduction, we were not in a very good way. And I'll tell you that that from the staff's perspective, they were not feeling very successful either. And I think that kind of at all levels, we knew we needed to do something differently. So that made us kind of ripe for people to be really open to a change like this. I would say probably the biggest challenge for us in implementing the project was that, you know, projects like this, Elo kind of alluded to this, they take a lot of internal time. You have to dedicate the time when you're trying to make a change in a process up front to make sure that it's successful so that you can realize the value over time. And implementing something like this that's highly technical requires a certain skill set in order to be able to lead and implement. And I would say that at the time that we kicked the project off, you know, nobody on my leadership team had really led an initiative like this before and had either the time, obviously we were overwhelmed because we were backlogged, or the technical expertise necessarily to implement the project. And I had a vacant director position at the time, and I ended up recruiting for a person and really focusing in on the skill set that I was lacking on the leadership team. And focusing in more on that technical skill set. So initially, when the project kicked off, I had to spend a lot of my own time in order to get the project going, but was able to kind of delegate some of that to Beth Carlson, who's our senior director, who I hired during the implementation of the project. And I think you know, getting somebody on the team who had the right technical expertise and really saw the project as a priority and put the time into it really made it successful in the long run. And then, you know, there were some folks that were resistant to automation. And I think one of the fears that people have around this type of thing is that a lot of the value when you're trying to label the value of a project like this, there's a lot of discussion around FTE. So this, you know, all of this work, that's equivalent to the work of X number of FTEs. And it's really hard to speak in those terms and not hear people. And so I would say that, you know, when you're talking about FTE value, you just have to be really careful that it doesn't translate into, you know, if a computer is doing X number of FTEs worth of work, that means that X number of people are not going to have jobs anymore. And that really wasn't the case, but the message had to be clear in order to make sure that folks knew that this was a project worth investing time in, and that our goal was not to eliminate people as part of the project, but really to elevate the level of work that our staff were doing. And so I think that's something to keep in mind as we're working through future automations and things. I'm still finding that kind of as a challenge when you're trying to get buy-in is not to focus in too much on the lingo of FTE value, although we know that that's what it's doing. It's doing the work of our people.
Perfect. Thank you. And we're going to be back to Leah in a minute. But first, get excited. We have another polling question. Do you feel you have the support within your organization required to ensure program success? Yes, I have support from all stakeholders. I have support from some, but not others. No, I don't have any support or unsure. We'll give it a minute. Let's see if we can get to 25%. We're at 20 right now. All right, there we go. Almost 30%. Yes, I have support. 30% of you said that. I have mixed support. That's almost 50%. That resonates. Very few have no support, but a lot, almost 20% are uncertain, which is enlightening. This was helpful, team. Thank you. We'll jump right back into to Leah, and I think you had teed up the slide showing the evolution from 2016 with a couple very poignant metrics, primarily around AR days. How has artificial intelligence impacted your rev cycle?
Well, as you can imagine, it's been dramatic. So in the fourth quarter last year, I mean, you can see on the slide, 2.4 million status checks through the automation with daily, almost 30,000 checks a day. And so what happened, what we thought was going to happen and what actually happened, it kind of was the same thing. But I would say that what we kind of anticipated was going to happen was kind of a hope. And it was kind of really cool to see it actually happen, because I think a lot of times when you're doing something new, you don't really know. You're kind of hopeful, but you don't really know. And so I think Elo and I, when we were doing the calculations of what we thought it was going to accomplish, I think we came up with 17 as the number of FTEs that we thought. Well, 17, we think it's 17 FTEs worth of work. Ultimately, when we implemented the automations, we caught up on the work actually pretty quickly once the automation was live, and some of our teams found that they really didn't have work for their entire teams to do. And so as we had vacancies, we shifted folks around, and we were able to not replace 15 open vacancies. And 15 is, I think, a conservative estimate, because we also have had obviously brought on new facilities that had vacancies that were not filled as well since the implementation. And so, I mean, equivalent of 48 FTEs of work that we replaced, but ultimately we were able to not replace 15 FTEs. And we did that kind of without skipping a beat. So it was like we didn't have to work super hard to kind of give people new job responsibilities to cover the work that we were doing as we had turnover, and it really kind of just kind of happened organically, really. It was exciting. So overall, at the end, we ended the year of 2020 at about the 50th percentile of our peer groups. And as I said, when we kicked it off, we were kind of the bottom 10%. And now we have goals of being top quartile, and we have some additional projects we'd like to do to get there. Ultimately, as I said, we did contract 15 FTEs, but we're also getting a lot more value out of the FTEs that we have being supported by the automations. And so more work's getting done, and we need fewer people to do it.
The metric improvement's pretty powerful here. I imagine also there was a bit of a human impact. There were probably impacts throughout the organization. So firstly, and then Elo, I'm curious on your thoughts too. What other outcomes emerged through the program that make you excited?
So for us, I mean, one of the things was, elevating the level that our staff were able to work. And of course, we had to, there was a lot of training involved in this, and identification of responsibilities and things that we weren't doing historically that we were able to do. And one of the things that we just implemented, or are in the process of implementing now, is a career ladder for our staff that are in that billing function. So where before we kind of just had a base function, now we have an ability to recognize people through a career ladder within their job function for that higher level of work. And kind of decision making that's required in the work that they're doing. And I kind of mentioned it before, where before the hard stuff was getting skipped, and the easy stuff is what we were working, and the hard stuff was not ever getting collected. We were ultimately writing some of that stuff off to timely filing. Now those accounts are being worked because they're in the priority list of accounts that need to be worked. And so initially, like, the management team was like, this is a lot of work for me, because these hard questions were coming up that maybe never had been addressed before. And I think with the career ladder, we're hoping that, we'll have that kind of higher level employee who's recognized at a higher level who can work those more difficult accounts, and we can make sure that everything's getting worked and not just the stuff that's easy to push through from a volume perspective.
Excellent. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Leah. I think from my perspective, the thing that I saw that was a welcome surprise, and Leah touched on this, was really taking that mindless part of the job, the boring part of the job, out of the equation so that our resources could focus on where they can truly add value using their human brains and not doing just the boring repetitive task. And so I think that I think that has an impact on the staff and then job satisfaction. And then the other thing that Leah touched on, that was a welcome surprise. Yeah, we replaced 15 FTEs, but like Leah mentioned, an average an FTE can do 400 claims per day, and now this bot does 18,000 per day. We replaced those 15 FTEs with the equivalent of 48, which means we didn't have 48 FTEs doing that because we couldn't afford to have that many FTEs doing that type of work. But we replaced the 15 that we did have with this digital workforce that is so much more efficient. And so what it means is we can get on top of our claims more often, and we can deal with the ones that require follow-up much faster than we ever did before. And so that had the welcome impact of cash accelerations and a lot of other bonuses that came from the automation. And so yeah, that would be from my perspective.
Excellent. Thank you both for sharing that. One question that we weren't able to get to in the previous section that is admittedly self-serving. Why Olive? What did you see about Olive throughout this process, from the rigorous due diligence through the execution? Can you just share a little bit about our journey together?
I'm happy to start. Why Olive? I think after we finish that, due diligence I talked about before, there are many reasons why we ended up choosing Olive. I think it starts with the fact that they had a very good reputation. I don't know why the light in my office went out. I apologize. They had a very good reputation. I remember I just talked with Leah about Olive. It was a new name for me, and I happened to be in an EPIC conference and with customers of Olive, and they were sharing their experience, and they got unsolicited positive feedback about Olive. So to me, that meant a lot because, hey, there are customers that are giving me this very unsolicited positive feedback about a vendor that we are currently evaluating. That sounds very promising, right? The other thing that it was important in our evaluation was the fact that Olive has a focus in healthcare. And they have built a lot of automations in healthcare. They have done this before many times. And so they have that ability to replicate what they have created across their customers. And for us, we were looking for ways to achieve value quickly, to get quickly to the low-hanging fruit. So it was a golden opportunity. And I know, of course, Olive is looking to expand and do even more, and we're looking to partner on doing more together. But getting to that low-hanging fruit soon was important to us. And I think that the other thing that also played an important role was the fact that Olive already had a relationship and an integration with EPIC. EPIC is our EHR, one of the largest vendors in the market, but it's also, in a way, they're very protective of their environment. They don't allow just any vendor to integrate with them. And so sometimes when you deal with other automation solutions, the other automation solutions may just work on the user interface and create the bot that will act through the same user interface that the human use, whereas Olive has the ability to integrate directly with Epic, and that creates even more efficiencies within the robotic automation process. So that was another big selling point, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I can talk about what it was like once we selected Olive and some of the implementation and some of the work that we did with you guys. I was impressed with not just your knowledge of healthcare, but it was revenue cycle specific knowledge. And when we did some of the initial assessments and talked about, what are the processes that we have in the revenue cycle that are kind of ripe for automation, the team that you brought on board were really impressive. It was impressive to me that they didn't just understand the technology, but they really did understand our business pretty well. And so I found that really impressive. And, throughout the implementation, we had to make changes to kind of our original paths. You may have an original path that you've set, you say we want to do it this way, but that doesn't necessarily work for another payer. It doesn't work for a different one of our teams or something. And I felt like the team was very agile and was able to kind of adapt to those changes and make those customizations where we needed them in order to get it to work for us. And I think I can be sometimes demanding as a client for a vendor. And I really felt like when I said something wasn't working, that the team was very responsive, got the resources dedicated, and solved any problems that I brought up throughout the implementation process. If I didn't think it was moving quickly enough, or I didn't like something that had happened, I really felt like Olive had great customer service and made sure that we hit the timelines that I had communicated to leadership. So I appreciated that through the whole process.
Thank you. Thank you both. We have a lot of the team joining this call, so I'm sure they're enthused to hear that feedback. We have one more polling question, and then we're going to get into some general Q&A after a wrap up from Elo and Leah, but this one we'll go through quickly. What is your biggest concern in managing your team's expectations through the changes brought on by a new automation program? Easing my team's anxiety about their jobs changing is one. Finding the most effective ways to engage my team in the program is 2. Building out the proper change management roadmap, 3. And understanding how to best upskill my workers, 4. And I actually think Leah touched on most of these. But we have 4 of 244, that's 2%. Yep, there we go. Now we got some responses. My Becker's facilitator is encouraging me to sing a tune here. So if we want to avoid that, let's see if we can get to 25%. Okay, there we go. That got everybody responding. All right. Easing my team's anxiety was the top at almost a third, but right behind at also a third is finding the most effective ways to engage. Then the last 2, understanding how to best upskill and building out the proper change management. So thank you very much for those responses. We'll now talk a little bit about scaling for the future. So Elo and Leah, we have a couple minutes before we want to do broad Q&A, but very quickly, can you both touch on lessons learned through this journey that you would share with maybe your past selves from 24 months ago? What should the group know?
So I can start with this one. So, there was a lot of discussion about change management and how do you get the staff on board with change. And I kind of went through what our path has been over the last, 5 years now. And change is the normal for us. We're constantly changing, and our staff had already been through a big change with the restructure that we did in the billing office. And as our CEO speaks about frequently, is one of the biggest contributors to the healthcare costs in the U.S. that are different than what you see in other nations have to do with the administrative overhead, the administrative burden that our system imposes on the system that the other countries don't have. And so we are very conscious that we are a significant portion of that administrative burden. It's basically all we are is administrative burden. I mean, we know it's a necessary one, but we want to reduce our costs where we can and be as efficient as possible to kind of to be more of a contributor to change in healthcare as opposed to just a burden to it. So, so I think that one thing to think about when you're going through this type of change is sometimes there's a huge investment in the front end, and sometimes that investment is really scary. We don't have time, and I know, like, as a revenue cycle leader, like, I don't have time. I don't have time to spend half of my time implementing a new project. But sometimes you have to step back and say, you know, do I have to commit a significant portion of my time in the short run to realize a benefit in the long run? And I think it's about making the commitment to that change, and also just identifying which transformational projects are going to have an impact in the long run, and focusing that time in the short term for the long-term gain. And I think that this project is a great example of that. I mean, I think we're doing it all the time, but this was a great example of how you can realize value over a long period of time by investing a significant amount of time in the short term.
So from my perspective, Brad, one of the lessons learned is through this journey so far is that, you know, for every project that succeeds, you also have projects that fail. And every project that failed was in areas where we did not have committed resources, where we did not have buy-in from operations, where we did not have strong subject matter experts that could help us uncover the potential value and build on the opportunities to design the best possible solution. I think we failed in areas where there was no appreciation of what the different parties were bringing to the table, where you really need to have that cross-collaboration, that multidisciplinary team, and have that commitment and share the goal to success. That has been, for me, the most important. Every project that I failed in this area has been where I didn't have that buy-in, where I didn't have that commitment.
Perfect. Thank you both. And Ela, we actually got a tee up from Gary Dean is one of our first questions. He was curious, are we doing just a few RPAs or a full-blown alpha site? And that's a perfect way to introduce this $10 million challenge and you and Leah's vision for what's next. Sure.
So obviously, we are very excited about the success that we already achieved in revenue cycle. And of course, we have many more things that we want to continue to do in revenue cycle. You already heard Leah talk about prioritization, eligibility verification. We're working also on models to help us predict denials, and we are working on opportunities to see if we can help with some of the coding. There is so much in that area, but we are really looking now to expand in many other areas. We are looking at the supply chain, we are looking at pharmacy with supporting their business operations, supporting the inventory, managing expiring inventory, auditing the 340B program. We are looking also at opportunities with human resources, so anything from onboarding, absence management, to pay practice reconciliations. There are huge opportunities. And so all in all, we have identified 31 candidate processes for automation. And we have a very ambitious goal. We have the ambitious goal to tackle at least 20 of them this year. And the ultimate goal with this project is to be able to automate and replace the work of 80 to 100 FTEs and realize a value in excess of $10 million. So it's an ambitious goal that we put for ourselves in just 1 year, and that we are pursuing. Excellent. Great way to wrap the core questions with one from the audience. We have another here from Wendy. Leah, this might be a good one for you. When you shift FTEs and give them new responsibilities,
What did that do to workforce satisfaction?
Well, I mean, generally we're looking for folks that fit in another role. I mean, the way that our teams are now split up is we're split up by hospital type, and then we're split up by payer. And so there may be like a person on the Blue Cross team who's getting heavily supported by Olive, and maybe we have a need on a team that isn't heavily supported like Olive, like our commercial team, because of secondaries and a lot of different payers. They don't get as much for a percentage of their total volume. So we'd be shifting an employee from doing the job function that they're doing under the Blue Cross team to the commercial team. Our ultimate goal is not to change their job responsibilities significantly, but their reporting might change. It wasn't as big of a problem because we have been doing this shifting over the last couple of years already. And so employees, I would say that the first change was probably the hardest, but that ultimately some of the shifting that we've done, we've tried to communicate to the employees and get people to volunteer or be willing to change something and try something new. And so I have not been aware of anybody negative about the changes that they had to, the position changes that they've had to make.
Excellent. And Elo, you had mentioned kind of the way Olive's able to interact with existing systems, a variety of them, but one of which is Epic. There's a question from Joseph on the impact on Epic work queue usage after Olive came into the picture. So for kind of both of you, maybe from the configuration side, but also the daily utilization side, are Epic work queues still providing value? How do they, what's been the response post-Olive for work queue usage?
If you're talking about the work queues, that I think that would be maybe more for you. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, we still use Epic work queues, and I think that the benefit of what we're doing now is we get a status back from Olive that allows us to classify accounts into work queues differently, and based on how those accounts are classified into work queues. Some of the work queues are more like holding work queues, waiting for something to happen. Like, for example, if a claim is status as paid, but we haven't gotten the remit yet, for example, that would go into a holding work queue. Or if the claim has been status as received and pending, that would go into a holding work queue. And that ultimately the work queues that we want our staff to be working have a lot fewer accounts in them, which allow them to focus in on the accounts that need to be worked and ultimately not be as overwhelming with the number of accounts that are in their work queues. So, but we do entirely work Epic work queues. It's entirely handled in Epic.
And Leah, if I recall, we had even some percentages of how much these work queues went down, and compared to the total number that we had before the implementation to after, and it was a dramatic change. Do you remember those stats?
I don't have the numbers like in front of me. It was difficult to measure at first because we did implement, I think, our first portal in, I think it was April, and it was right around the, obviously the time that COVID hit, and so volumes were down in general. So it's more what we've watched happen. But yeah, like I think it depended on the payer, but I think for Blue Cross, which was the one that we had the biggest impact in, I think we saw over a 50% reduction of accounts that were actually in the work queue to be worked.
Yes.
But there were a lot of the accounts that were shuffled off into work queues that were holding until either that the claim got restatused as something other than pending, like paid or denied, or ultimately received a remit that resolved the account.
And Leah, the last question I think we can round out with, because you both teased at it there. What was the implementation timeline? You mentioned you went live first in April. It was definitely a sequential kind of journey to inform lessons learned. But can you just speak a little bit about that part?
Yeah. So I think we kicked the project off sometime, I think, in January or beginning of February. And I think we had our first portal live, I think it was the end of April. So it was like a few months. We started with our Blue Cross portal. And so that was the first one that we immediately started seeing impact in. But it was portal by portal. So it kind of trickled in, which again was good for us, because when you start seeing the, so when the Blue Cross team started seeing the results, kind of what the statusing was doing to their daily work. And the staff were very positive about it, and that kind of trickles out to the other teams, because since we're going portal by portal, it was impacting different teams at different times. And so the reception of the product was very, very positive. And actually now for staff that actually do have to go out and manually status things because it wasn't either one of the portals that we included, or it was it's not something that can be statused via portal, for example. They don't really like doing that work anymore. It's definitely changed how they think about their work. And so I think the first one went live in April, and then they trickled in. And I think a majority of the portals were live, I believe, by the end of August. But there were a couple of portals that we had some, like especially our state Medicaid portal, we're still having problems with, and it's not really a problem with the automation. It's just that the infrastructure of that portal itself is very unstable. And so when you're trying to hit it with the frequency that all of us trying to hit it, it doesn't stay stable long enough for us to get kind of the results that we would expect. And then we did have a couple of other hiccups along the way related to the way that the portals were reacting to Olive, and Olive had to adjust like the frequency, like how quickly Olive worked, because some of the portals like didn't want to be overwhelmed with the number of accounts that were hitting it, and also just the sheer number of statuses that we were hitting the portals with. So I know that that's a limitation that when you're dealing with a third party, you have to manage based on what they're willing to, how they're willing to interact with the automation.
Perfect.
But
and
I was probably 6 months when a majority of it was done and actually active in the systems, probably 6 months.
Excellent. Thank you for that. That definitely reinforced, Elo, your earlier comments around starting small, building successes, going big over time. Well, we are at our hour. I wanted to thank Elo and Leah very much. It's a pleasure to work with you all as much as I've had the fortune of doing over the past couple months. And Becker's team, thank you very much. For those of you that asked questions in the portal that we didn't get to, we've got those captured, and we'll follow up with you directly on some of those more specific questions. But appreciate the time. With that, I will pass back to Ayla to wrap us.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I also want to thank Elo and Leah for that excellent presentation, and Olive for sponsoring today's webinar. To learn more about the content presented today, please check out the resources section on your webinar console and fill out the post-webinar survey. And thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.